Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome back to the Stratos 201 Rehab. Today, I'm going to run you through what's happened in the last week or so, so stick around. Okay, haven't shot video much in the last week, only because there's been a lot of really boring crap going on that is like watching paint dry. A lot of little structural things, a lot of cleanup. I'm going to run you through where we're at on the boat and get you guys updated on where we're going. Okay, so let's go to the front. This is the extended casting deck. I fabbed it out of 3/4 plywood. I had braced and put the vertical piece in, epoxied it in. Same thing with this, which was just an open area. It's now a compartment. It's going to be a carpeted compartment just for your day stuff, like your keys and your wallet, stuff you don't want to get wet. So this lid is being fabricated. This lid is being fabricated as a copy of this lid. So these two will be identical. This lid is being fabricated. It's a copy of one of the rear storage compartments. And hopefully I'll get those back in a few days. This is still a little high. I've got to take my support down a little bit. I missed my line down there when I was epoxying it in. So just to get everything flush. I haven't put it in place yet, only because I want to finish the sanding and the fairing inside of that compartment, which is going to hold the batteries. It's a lot easier to do without the lid on it, obviously. So I'm going to get that done, and then I'll fit this into place perfectly. We'll epoxy it down and finish the edging that will match this profile here of the original lids. A lot of work involved in this. Spent a lot of time, days actually, fabricating this to fit. But it was extremely slow work, and you guys didn't need to see that. All right, the other thing I've done is this piece here in the middle is the front seat post. And it was completely delaminated. I built it out of 2 sheets of 3/4 plywood epoxy together. So that's 1.5 inches thick in there. I still want to do some finish work, get everything flush with the deck, but what I did was I came in here and I cut for the tray for the trolling motor pedal, and what I found I didn't like. It was back in the back here where these holes had been drilled, and I don't even know what those holes were for. That happened before I got the boat. Oh, you know what those were? I do remember what those holes were for. Those were the Bigfoot pedals, because this had a hand-controlled trolling motor on it, and that was a Bigfoot switch. So I could turn the trolling motor on just by clicking the switch, because it was hand controlled. So that's what those were. But anyway, it had gotten water damage, at least in this side. It delaminated the plywood. The fiberglass is delaminated here, but the plywood is good underneath it. I'll drill some holes in this and inject epoxy and get that back down where it belongs. One thing I did not know about bass boats is that the front deck, at least in the 92 design, floats. It has no support directly to the stringers, and I don't know why, but this one now will. This is the inside of the fiberglass tub for that compartment, and what I've done is I got a 3/4 inch piece of ply down to the stringers, epoxied in. I did this yesterday, and then I will build this back to the shape of, it's actually going to come out to about right here, where the trolling motor pedal recess tray will fit in, and we'll probably wind up putting that in last, but I'll epoxy these edges. I am going across the whole deck with some 1708 biaxial fiberglass to give it a lot of strength. Right now it's very rigid. I had to pull it up because there was about a 1/2 inch dip sag in the front deck. Again, it wasn't supported underneath, and that was just, when you walked on it you could feel it. So I decided, I put these temporary braces in here. I pulled everything up with the hand clamps. I didn't want to stress it too much, but I got it back a little higher than level, just barely a little crown in it. Epoxy this in, and I think when I let these clamps off here in a little bit, it's going to go back down flat. Well, I hope so anyway. And then today I'm going to get to laminating this repair in the front deck, get this finished up. The only other thing we really need to work on up here is I've got a cracked piece of where the trim piece goes in for, this will be a plug. There was a bunch of switches. This boat was way overwired. You could control the live wells and the timers and the aerators and everything up here. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the only thing that'll be up here is a nav light switch and a trim switch and a trolling motor plug and power for the electronics will be up here. That, and then so I'm going to be filling. I'll be filling these holes with epoxy, a thickened epoxy, and then we'll be glassing over the top of this. I'll fill this obviously with putty, with the fairing compound. Get all this loose stuff off. I'll put a piece of 1708 in here, and then we'll go back with primer over top of that, and then there'll be gel coat, and then the trolling motor, we'll drill new holes to mount the new trolling motor on what will be the new bow piece. Now, back in the back here, this was the rear seat post mount. This was solid plywood at one time, and it was completely delaminated. So I took a cutoff wheel, and I cut just below the radius of the existing fiberglass, and it peeled right off. And what I did yesterday is I laminated 2 sheets of 3/4 ply in here. I was able to take this plywood out and save the gel coat, and the fiberglass underneath it had delaminated so bad I just was able to take it out with a wire wheel down to existing fiberglass. I skim coated it with a thickened epoxy I made up of glass spears and the 5-to-1 Total Boat 5-to-1 epoxy with the slow set, and then I have 2 sheets of 3/4 plywood laminating in here. You can see where I drilled a few holes to get the epoxy to squeeze out, and then these are just clamping it down. I'll be able to take these off here this morning. And that's going to need to be planed down a little bit. I'll bring my hand planer out and get that perfectly level to where it's supposed to be, and then I will drill some holes in this fiberglass cap that I'm going to put back on to make sure I get plenty of epoxy to bond from here to the bottom side of that piece of fiberglass I took out. And we'll squeeze that down, and then that will be ready to drill and put a new seat base in. Other than that, there's been a lot of cleanup. We pressure washed the boat. We've got almost all the carpet remnants out. The other problem I had up here, and it's a small issue, but in this compartment, and you can see where I've got a little brace here now, the only place I found any delaminated fiberglass inside the hull was 2 little spots. One here, and it was just a top layer of fiberglass had cracked, and just some stress cracking for over the 32 years this boat has been alive. So I injected a thickened epoxy in here. I covered it with the craft paper, and then I just used this piece of 1/4-inch plywood and basically a paint stir stick to keep pressure down. It's time to pop it off and see how it turned out actually. The paper's probably going to stay, but I'll sand the paper back out. But looks like it is solid now. It's not moving around anymore. So I'll sand this paper off here, and then this will be ready. I'm probably going to coat everything I can get to with a primer, the epoxy total barrier primer. I've got access to it. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not that expensive. I'll probably spend an extra $100 on primer just to waterproof one more time everything I have access to. And then this will be carpeted as well as that one, and then the rod locker. Now I had the same issue, same spot in the rod locker. It wasn't as bad. It was just some spider cracking in the top of the fiberglass. Again, I peeled it up a little bit with a putty knife, injected some epoxy, pushed it back down, and it stuck down. Now, the last thing I want to show you is the bilge area, which was disgusting when we started in here. We've got it pressure washed and cleaned out now. So, and it's still bleeding a little bit of water, but I don't know where that's coming from. No, I got a little bit of water, not much. I'm going to let that dry a few more days and get all of that moisture out of that fiberglass. None of it's delaminated. I don't know where that water is coming from, but that's the only wet spot in the boat, and it looks like it's coming out of this joint here. But that fiberglass is still solid. There's no delam at all. So we'll keep vacuuming it out, but that's the area of the bilge that never gets dry. I mean, it stays wet because that little bit of water, this is the drain hole here, and it's about 3/4 of an inch above the bottom of the boat. I don't know why they did it that way, but what we're going to do is we're going to fill that level so that it won't hold any more water. Fill it with a piece of another piece of fiberglass and epoxy, then at least to raise it a little closer. And then obviously this is the depression for your bilge pump. So in the next few days, hopefully we get this dried out. I get my structural repairs made. We've got some tiny holes to fill. I've got some cracks here in the original gel coat. I'm going to fill these with thickened epoxy, and then we'll start sanding and get ready for primer. So this, I know it doesn't look like, or at least to me, it doesn't look like things are happening very fast, but they are. It's just stuff that has to be done. The structural stuff is not sexy. You don't see much happening on film, which is why I haven't really been shooting much. But we're getting to the point now where, like I said, a few more days of structural stuff, we'll start getting nitpicky in like this crack here in the gel coat. I'll grind it out a little larger, fill it with a thickened epoxy, and then start sanding for primer. So hopefully within the next week, this boat is a different color. It'll be white because that's the color of the primer, and we'll start getting the final sanding done, getting ready for gel coat, which is exciting. I've never done gel coat. So you guys can learn as we go. That's the 2.5 week update. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.